The village of Ngolomi, nestled between dense, whispering forests, where ancient trees stood tall as if carrying the weight of forgotten tales. At sunrise, the horizon was painted gold, and the air carried the earthy scent of dew-soaked fields. Life in Ngolomi was simple but deeply intertwined with tradition. Every field was a testament to the villagers' hard work, and every harvest was a sacred dance between humanity and nature. In the heart of the village, the people worked tirelessly on the red soil, planting yams and millet with hands roughened by generations of labor. They did not merely grow crops, they nurtured their ancestors' blessings. Stories passed down through generations reminded them that the land was alive, pulsing with the spirits of those who came before. Every evening, the villagers would gather under the great baobab tree, its roots sprawling like an elder's arms, reaching out to embrace them. Beneath its branches, tales were told of great warriors, cunning tricksters, and the wisdom of the ancestors. These stories were not just entertainment, they were the moral compass of Ngolomi, shaping the hearts and minds of its people. At the edge of the village lived Ngoma, the spiritual guide, whose presence was as steady as the mountains in the distance. Ngoma's hut was adorned with beads, calabashes, and animal skins, symbols of her deep connection to the ancestors. Her hair, silver as moonlight, was braided intricately, and her eyes carried the weight of knowing. Ngoma was not an ordinary elder. She was the bridge between the living and the departed, a keeper of dreams and whispers from the beyond. Villagers sought her wisdom in times of joy and despair, for she could see what others could not. One morning, as Ngoma swept the dirt outside her hut, she paused. A cold wind passed through the village, despite the sun's warmth, and the soft hum of distant birds went silent. She looked up and whispered, "The spirits are restless." She reached for her staff, its top carved into the shape of an eagle, and closed her eyes. "Balance has been disrupted," she murmured, her voice trembling. "The truth must soon be uncovered, or the ancestors will speak louder." Among the villagers was Ajuma, a 16-year-old girl with a mind sharp as the lion's claws. Her laughter, when it came, was bright and quick, but in recent months, it had faded into silence. Ajuma had inherited her late mother's almond-shaped eyes and kind spirit, yet, where her mother once brought warmth to the household, Ajuma now carried the chill of her absence. Ajuma's world revolved around her father, Makena, a proud farmer known for his booming laughter and strong hands. Since her mother's passing, he had married Nyambura, a woman whose beauty masked her envy. Ajuma and Nyambura lived under the same roof, but their hearts beat out of rhythm, clashing like discordant drums. When Nyambura spoke, her words were laced with charm, but Ajuma saw the venom behind her smile. Nyambura often watched Ajuma with narrowed eyes, as if measuring her worth and finding it lacking. The bond between Makena and his daughter, unshaken even by grief, only deepened Nyambura's bitterness. In Ajuma's possession was a diary, small, leather-bound treasure, given to her by her mother before her passing. Its cover was worn but elegant, engraved with patterns that mimicked the rivers running through their land. For Ajuma, the diary was not just a keepsake, it was her sanctuary, a place where she poured her thoughts, fears, and dreams. But the diary held more than memories. Hidden within its pages was a truth that weighed on Ajuma's heart, a secret so dark that she dared not speak it aloud. Every night, as the village fell silent and the stars blanketed the sky, Ajuma wrote feverishly by candlelight. Her words, I told of things she had seen and heard, things that threatened to tear her family apart. The signs began subtly, a crow landed on the family's doorstep one evening, cawing incessantly as if delivering a warning. The villagers murmured about it, their faces shadowed with unease. Then, the family's treasured calabash, passed down for 3 generations, shattered without cause. Ajuma's nights grew restless, plagued by dreams of her mother, whose voice she could hear, but whose face was shrouded in mist. The ancestors speak through signs, Ngoma said one evening, her voice carrying across the gathering under the baobab tree. When the balance is disturbed, they send whispers. If we do not listen, those whispers become storms. Ajuma, sitting quietly in the shadows, clenched her diary tighter. She knew the whispers were growing louder, and the storm was drawing near. At home, the tension thickened like smoke. Makena remained unaware of the turmoil brewing beneath his roof, too distracted by his work and his trust in Nyambura. But Ajuma could feel the hostility radiating from her stepmother. Nyambura's once subtle jabs turned sharper. She criticized Ajuma's every move, her words like thorns hidden beneath flowers. In her solitude, Ajuma struggled to hold her family together. She knew that the truth in her diary could shatter what little peace they had left. Yet, the ancestors' signs reminded her that the longer secrets festered, the more pain they would cause. When finally revealed, as Ajuma watched the sun dip behind the trees one evening, she whispered to herself, "The storm is coming." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the baobab tree, as if echoing her thoughts. Though she did not know how, Ajuma resolved to weather the storm, carrying with her the strength of her ancestors and the love of the mother she had lost but never forgotten. The midday sun cast long shadows across the village as Nyambura sat weaving a basket near the doorway of her home. Her hands moved deftly, but her mind was elsewhere. Her lips curled into a small smile as she glanced over at Makena, who was fixing a broken tool under the shade of the mango tree. Her voice, low and sweet, carried the sharpness of a hidden blade. "Makena, have you noticed how Ajuma has changed lately?" she began. Keeping her tone light, Makena looked up, surprised. "Changed? What do you mean?" Nyambura paused, pretending to consider her words carefully. "She has become distant, unruly even. Just last week, I saw her wandering near the forest after sunset. You know the elders say the spirits are strongest at that time. I fear she is inviting trouble, perhaps even a curse." Makena frowned, setting down his tool. "Ajuma, wandering after sunset. That doesn't sound like her." Nyambura sighed dramatically, her hands resting on the half-woven basket. "You are her father, Makena. You see her with a father's love, but I see things more clearly." The villagers have started talking. They say perhaps the spirit of her mother lingers and has brought a shadow upon her. Makena's brow furrowed deeply. The suggestion unsettled him, though he tried to brush it off. People will always talk. Ajuma is just grieving in her own way. Nyambura leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Perhaps, but grief can twist the heart, Makena. I only speak out of concern, for her and for this family." She placed a hand on his arm, her eyes earnest and filled with feigned sorrow. Makena nodded slowly, though doubt flickered in his eyes. Ajuma felt the weight of the whispers before she heard them. The once warm smiles of the villagers were now replaced with wary glances. Women hushed their conversations as she walked by, their eyes darting away when she looked at them. In her own home, Nyambura's words turned sharper, cloaked in false concern. "Ayajuma, don't leave your shoes scattered by the door. It's improper." Or, "You should learn to respect your father's wishes. A daughter should bring honor to her family, not shame." Makena, once her greatest ally, grew distant. His laughter no longer filled the house. and his once warm eyes now looked at her with uncertainty. One evening, as Ajuma sat in the corner of the room, writing in her diary, Nyambura stood in the doorway, watching her with a thin smile. "What secrets do you keep in that little book of yours, Ajuma?" she asked. Ajuma froze, clutching the diary to her chest. "It's nothing important," she replied quickly. Nyambura tilted her head, her smile widening. "Secrets can be dangerous, child. You should be careful. Some things are better left unsaid." At night, Ajuma's unease grew. The cawing of the crow outside her window seemed louder than before. The shadows cast by the flickering oil lamp stretched unnaturally across the walls. Her diary, once a source of comfort, now felt like a weight pulling her deeper into despair. She wrote feverishly, her hand trembling as she poured her fears onto the pages. "The villagers avoid me. Father no longer sees me as he once did. Nyambura's words are poison, seeping into every corner of my life. But I cannot reveal the truth. Not yet. The storm is coming, and I must be ready." The memory came unbidden. As Ajuma stared at her diary one night, she was only 10 years old when she overheard the argument between her mother and Nyambura. It was late, and the voices carried through the thin walls of their home. "You think I don't know what you've done?" her mother had hissed, her voice shaking with fury. "You've poisoned this family with your jealousy. And what will you do about it?" Nyambura had replied, her tone icy and unrepentant. "Makena will never believe you. You're nothing but a shadow to him now, fading away with every passing day." Ajuma's small hands gripped the edge of her mat as she listened, fear rooting her to the spot. She didn't understand everything, but the venom in Nyambura's words was clear. A few weeks later, her mother was gone. The distant sound of a drum brought Ajuma back to the present. She closed her diary, her heart pounding. She knew the truth, but revealing it would tear her family apart. Yet the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. The next morning, Ngoma appeared at their doorstep, her staff tapping rhythmically against the ground. "Ajuma," she said, her voice low and steady. "The ancestors are restless. They speak of imbalance, of truths buried too long." Ajuma swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I don't know what to do, Ngoma. If I speak, I will lose everything." Ngoma placed a hand on Ajuma's shoulder, her touch firm and grounding. "Silence does not preserve peace, child. It only delays the storm. The ancestors demand balance, and they will not rest until it is restored. You must trust in their wisdom." Nyambura watched Ajuma more closely in the days that followed. She noticed how the girl clutched her diary as if it were a lifeline, how her gaze darted nervously around the room whenever Nyambura entered. One afternoon, as Ajuma worked in the fields, Nyambura crept into her room. Her eyes scanned the modest space, searching for the diary. When she finally found it tucked beneath a woven mat, she smiled triumphantly. But before she could open it, the sound of footsteps startled her. She quickly replaced the diary and stepped out, her expression calm and unbothered. Ajuma entered the room moments later, her eyes narrowing, as she noticed the slight misplacement of her belongings. She rushed to the mat, her heart racing as she confirmed her suspicions. "She knows," Ajuma whispered to herself, clutching the diary tightly. The tension in the household reached a boiling point. Every word spoken was laced with hidden meaning, every glance filled with suspicion. Ajuma stayed on guard, knowing that Nyambura would not stop until she uncovered the truth. And as the wind howled through the trees one night, Ajuma knew that the storm Ngoma had warned of was about to break. The morning sun rose slowly, casting a golden glow over the village. Nyambura moved about the house with sharp intent, her steps quick and deliberate. She had been watching Ajuma closely in recent days, noticing how the girl clung to that leather-bound diary, like it was a piece of her soul. Today, with Ajuma away at the market, her chance had come. In Ajuma's small room, Nyambura searched. Methodically, she lifted the mat near the bed, pulled open wooden drawers, and finally, behind a stack of folded cloth, her fingers brushed the rough surface of the diary. With a triumphant smirk, she pulled it out, running her fingers over the carved patterns. As she flipped through the pages, her eyes widened, then narrowed. The more she read, the tighter her grip on the diary became. Her secrets, the ones she had buried so carefully, were all here, written in Ajuma's careful, deliberate hand. Her poisoning of Ajuma's mother, the slow poisoning of Makena, even her cruel words whispered in the shadows. Nyambura's breathing quickened. "That little snake," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "She dares accuse me? She dares keep this against me." She slammed the diary shut, her mind racing. This could ruin her. She could not allow Ajuma to destroy everything she had built. No, she would strike first, twist the truth, and turn Makena against her. By the time Ajuma returned from the market, Nyambura was waiting, her arms crossed, and her eyes blazing like a storm on the horizon. Makena sat nearby, his face already shadowed with concern. "Ajuma," Nyambura began, her voice sharp as a knife. "What is this filth you've been writing about me?" Ajuma froze, clutching the basket of yams tightly. Her eyes darted to the diary in Nyambura's hands. "You went through my things?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "And what if I did?" Nyambura shot back, stepping closer. "You've been spreading lies, trying to destroy this family. Makena, look at her. She hides in her room, writing these wicked things about me, plotting against us." Makena stood slowly, his confusion clear. "Ajuma, is this true?" His voice was steady but uncertain, the doubt in his tone cutting into Ajuma like a blade. Ajuma took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "No, Baba, it's not true. The things I wrote, they are not lies. They are the truth. I've been afraid to say them, but..." "Truth?" Nyambura interrupted with a bitter laugh. "She calls this truth. She's poisoning your mind against me, Makena. Do you see what she's doing? She wants to drive us apart." Makena raised a hand, silencing them both. "Enough," he said, firmly. "Ajuma, if there is truth in what you've written, then you must speak it now. Let me hear it from your own lips." Ajuma's hand shook as she stepped forward. "Baba, please listen. I wrote what I wrote because I couldn't hold it inside any longer. Nyambura, she poisoned Mama. I heard her say it. She was jealous, and she wanted you for herself. And now she's doing the same to you." The words hung heavy in the air, like the stillness before a storm. Nyambura gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "How dare you? How dare you accuse me of such evil?" Makena's face twisted with shock. He looked from Ajuma to Nyambura, his hands trembling. This cannot be true." "It is," Ajuma said firmly, though her voice cracked under the weight of her words. "And if you don't believe me, Baba, let Ngoma and the ancestors decide. Let the truth come to light." The village square buzzed with tension as the people gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree. Ngoma stood at the center, her staff planted firmly in the ground. Her presence was commanding, her silver hair gleaming like a crown in the afternoon sun. Makena sat near Ngoma, his expression a mix of disbelief and grief. Ajuma stood beside him, clutching the diary tightly to her chest. Nyambura, dressed in her finest clothes, sat rigidly, her face a mask of defiance. Ngoma raised a hand, and the murmurs of the crowd fell silent. "We are here to seek the truth," she began, her voice resonating with authority. The ancestors see what we cannot. They reveal what is hidden. Today, we will uncover what lies in the shadows. Ajuma stepped forward, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. This diary holds the truth, she said, holding it up for all to see. It tells of things I've seen and heard. Things that have haunted me for years. Ngoma took the diary, her fingers brushing over its worn cover. She opened it and began to read aloud. Her voice calm, but heavy with meaning. She read of Nyambura's jealousy, her whispered confession of poisoning Ajuma's mother, and her slow, calculated plan to do the same to Makena. The villagers gasped, their eyes wide with horror. Makena sat frozen, his face pale, as Ngoma continued. Nyambura rose suddenly, her voice ringing out, "Lies! All lies! This girl is desperate for attention. She would say anything to turn you against me." Ngoma fixed her with a piercing gaze. "The ancestors. Do not lie, Nyambura. Their signs have spoken." The village herbalist stepped forward, holding a small vial. "I examined Makena," she said, her voice solemn. "There are traces of a toxin in his system, a slow poison given. Over time, the crowd erupted in murmurs, their shock palpable. Nyambura's composure began to crack, her hands trembling as she clutched the edges of her shawl. Cornered and exposed, Nyambura's rage boiled over. "Fine!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the square. "Yes, I did it. I poisoned her mother. I would have poisoned Makena too, if it meant keeping what was mine. I was tired of being nothing, tired of watching from the shadows." Her confession left the villagers stunned into silence. Then, as one, they turned to Ngoma, awaiting her judgment. Ngoma lifted her staff, her expression grave. "Nyambura has broken the sacred bond of trust and family. Her actions have disturbed the balance of this village and angered the ancestors. She must leave this place, never to return." The villagers murmured their agreement, and a group of men stepped forward to escort Nyambura away. As she was led out of the square, her defiance faded, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Ajuma watched her go, her emotions a storm within her. She felt no triumph, only sorrow for the family that had been broken. That evening, Makena knelt before Ajuma, his eyes filled with tears. "My daughter," he said, his voice breaking, "I failed you. I failed your mother. I let my blindness cause you so much pain. Forgive me." Ajuma knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "I forgive you, Baba. We will heal together. For Mama." The baobab tree swayed gently in the evening breeze, its roots steady and strong, a reminder of the family's resilience and the enduring connection to their ancestors. The morning air in the village was cool, carrying the soft scent of herbs from the nearby forest. In Makena's home, the rhythmic chants of the village herbalist could be heard. She worked with precision, grinding roots and leaves into a paste, her hands steady as she mixed them into a bowl of steaming water. "This will cleanse his body," she said, her voice calm and sure. She dipped a cloth into the mixture and handed it to Ajuma. "Wipe his skin with this and let him drink the tea twice a day." Ajuma nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she took the cloth. She turned to her father, who lay weak on the mat, his once strong frame now thin and fragile. "Baba, you will get better," she whispered, her voice filled with quiet determination. Makena opened his eyes and gave her a faint smile. "My daughter, you have carried more than your share of burdens. Forgive me for not seeing what was in front of me." Ajuma blinked back tears as she gently wiped his forehead. "You are my father. We will heal together." Outside, the villagers gathered, bringing baskets of food, jars of water, and their prayers. "Makena is a good man," one elder said. We must stand with him in his time of need. Their presence was a reminder of the strength that lay in unity, a cornerstone of their community. As the days passed, Makana's strength began to return. He sat outside the house, under the shade of the mango tree, watching Ajuma as she directed workers in the fields. Her voice carried with authority, and her movements were quick and efficient. "She has grown," Makana said softly to the herbalist, who sat beside him. "In my blindness, I did not see the woman she was becoming." The herbalist nodded. "She has the spirit of her mother, strong and unwavering. She carries the weight of this family with grace." Ajuma, unaware of their conversation, walked toward them with a bright smile. "Baba, the fields are flourishing again. The rains have blessed us." Makana reached for her hand. "And so have you, Ajuma. You have blessed this family with your courage. I am proud of you." The villagers, once doubtful of Ajuma's strength, now sought her advice. They watched as she transformed her pain into wisdom, and her leadership became an inspiration to all. In her quiet moments, Ajuma would sit by the fire, her diary in hand. Its pages, filled with her journey, became a testament to her resilience. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast golden hues across the land, Ajuma gathered a group of children under the great baobab tree. They sat in a circle, their faces eager and full of curiosity. "Do you know why the baobab tree stands so strong?" she asked, her voice steady and warm. The children shook their heads, their eyes wide. "Because it has deep roots," she explained. "Even when storms come and the winds blow, it does not fall. That is how we must be, rooted in truth, in courage, and in love." She began to tell them her story, weaving her experiences into a tale of jealousy, betrayal, and redemption. Her words were simple, but carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "Jealousy is a seed," she said. "If you water it, it will grow and choke everything good around it. But truth is like the sun. No matter how long it is hidden, it will always rise." The children listened intently, their young minds absorbing the lessons. Ajuma's diary, once a private sanctuary, became a guide for the next generation, a symbol of the power of truth and resilience. As the days turned to weeks, Ajuma found herself thinking of Nyambura. Though her stepmother was gone, her actions still echoed in Ajuma's heart. One evening, she knelt by her mat, her head bowed in prayer. "Ancestors, I pray for Nyambura," she said softly. Her heart was poisoned by jealousy and pain, but "I will not let my heart carry the same burden. I forgive her, not for what she did, but for what it cost her. I pray she finds peace, wherever she is." As she spoke, a gentle breeze swept through the room, rustling the pages of her diary. It felt like a sign, a quiet assurance that her forgiveness had been heard. In that moment, Ajuma felt the weight of anger lift from her shoulders. She smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The villagers gathered once more under the baobab tree, their faces expectant as Ngoma stood before them. Her staff, adorned with symbols of the ancestors, caught the light of the setting sun. "The ancestors have spoken," Ngoma began, her voice firm yet gentle. "They have shown us the cost of greed and the power of truth. We must honor their wisdom by living with integrity." She looked out at the crowd, her gaze piercing. "Jealousy and betrayal will always come to light, for the ancestors see all. Let this be a reminder that our actions, good or bad, echo beyond our time." The villagers nodded, murmuring their agreement. Ngoma's words, heavy with meaning, settled into their hearts, a reminder to walk the path of honesty and respect for their heritage. Early one morning, Ajuma carried a young sapling to the hill, where her mother was buried. The grave was marked by a simple stone, worn smooth by time. She knelt beside it, her hands gently pressing the soil around the roots of the tree. "This is for you, Mama," she whispered. "A tree that will grow strong, just as you taught me to be." The tree was a hardy species, one that thrived even in the harshest conditions. To Ajuma, it symbolized her journey, her pain, her growth, and her strength. She sat beside the grave, her hand resting on the stone. The morning light bathed the hill, and the world felt quiet and at peace. Ajuma smiled, her heart full of hope. She had honored her mother's memory and found her own path, one rooted in truth and resilience. The ancestors, she felt, were pleased.